there are moments when reality does not match your memory. A spelling that feels wrong, a logo that looks off, a movie quote you could swear existed. Many remember Darth Vader saying, "Luke, I am your father," though the real line is, "No, I am your father." Others picture the Monopoly man with a monocle he never had. The same wrong memories, shared by thousands. What if these are not mistakes, but signs you have shifted between timelines without ever noticing? Some call it false memory. Others whisper about parallel universes, quantum slips, or a simulation adjusting itself. What if every close call or near-death moment moved you to a version of reality where you survived, but small details changed? What if you are no longer in the timeline you began in? So relax and slow your breath as we drift into a quieter exploration of the moments when your memories no longer match the world around you. Picture the Monopoly man in your mind right now. The mascot from the board game, Rich Uncle Pennybags, though most people just know him as the Monopoly man. Close your eyes for a moment and see him clearly. The top hat, the white moustache, the tuxedo, and that monocle, the small round lens over one eye, the thin gold chain, the way it catches the light as he counts his money. You can see it, can't you? Thousands of people can. They remember the monocle so clearly they could describe it in detail, the gold rim, the way it magnified one eye, making him look more scrutinizing, more like an old money tycoon examining your property holdings with that single enlarged eye. It's part of who he is, part of his character. The monocle completes the image of a wealthy old man from another era, but he's never worn one, not once, not ever, not in any version of the game, not on any box, not on any card, not in any piece of official Monopoly artwork produced since the game was created in 1935. Go look right now if you have the game, check the box, check the cards, check every piece of official imagery, no monocle. There never has been. And that feels wrong, doesn't it? It looks incomplete, like something essential has been removed, like the image has been stripped of a detail that defined the character. Some people describe a physical sensation when they see it, a kind of vertigo, a sense that the ground has shifted slightly beneath them, just enough to notice, just enough to make them doubt what they thought they knew. This isn't just you. This is thousands of people, spread across different countries, different generations, different backgrounds, all remembering the exact same thing. The monocle, not glasses, not a lorgnette, not any other kind of eyewear. The monocle specifically, a single lens over one eye. And it was never there. You might think this is confusion with Mr. Peanut, the Planters mascot, who does wear a monocle. He has the top hat too, the cane, that same old-timey wealthy aesthetic. Maybe people are mixing up two similar characters. That's a reasonable explanation. Except the memories are too specific. People remember the Monopoly man's monocle, not Mr. Peanut's. They remember seeing it on the Monopoly box, on the cards, in advertisements. They remember it as a defining feature of that specific character. So where did that memory come from? Let's move to something else, something even stranger. Think about the Fruit of the Loom logo, the underwear and clothing brand. Picture the logo in your mind. What do you see? Fruit, certainly. Grapes, apples, maybe some leaves, all arranged together. But what's behind them? What's holding them? What container are they spilling out of? A cornucopia, a woven horn of plenty, brown and basket-like, with the fruit emerging from its wide opening. The classic symbol of harvest and abundance. You can probably picture it right now. The way the woven pattern looked, the way the fruit was positioned, emerging from it, the way it gave the logo depth and meaning. Except there's no cornucopia on the Fruit of the Loom logo. There never has been. Not in the current logo, not in any previous version, not in company records going back to the 1800s. Just fruit on a white background. No basket, no horn of plenty, no woven container of any kind. The fruit just floats there, uncontained, with nothing behind it. And this one is truly fascinating. Because people don't just vaguely remember a cornucopia. They remember learning what the word meant because of that logo. They remember being children, pointing at the tag on their shirt, asking a parent, "What's that basket thing?" and being told it was called a cornucopia. They remember that specific moment of learning a new word. They remember that conversation. They remember being taught about Thanksgiving and harvest symbols, and someone pointing to their clothing tag as an example. Those are detailed memories. specific memories, memories with context and emotion and surrounding details. Not vague impressions, but clear recollections of entire experiences built around something that apparently never existed. There are newspaper articles from the 1990s that describe the Fruit of the Loom logo as having a cornucopia. There are parodies and references in other media that include the cornucopia as part of the design. There are people who drew the logo from memory in school and included the cornucopia, then got marked correct. So what happened? Where did thousands of people get this same specific, detailed, identical false memory? Why a cornucopia specifically? Why not a basket or a bowl or a plate? Why do all the false memories match each other so precisely? Think about Curious George for a moment. The little monkey from the children's books and television shows. Picture him in your mind. Brown fur, yellow hat, that mischievous smile. And his tail, the way he would hang from it, swing from trees, use it for balance, curl it around branches. Except Curious George has never had a tail, not in any book, not in any television episode, not in any official artwork or merchandise. He's a tailless monkey, which is actually accurate if you consider him a great ape rather than a monkey, but completely wrong for what most people remember seeing. You might think, well, we just associate monkeys with tails. Most monkeys have them, so our brains fill in that detail. That's a reasonable explanation, except people don't just have a vague sense that he should have had a tail. They remember specific scenes. They remember watching him swing from his tail. They remember episodes where his tail was part of the plot. They remember details about what the tail looked like, how he used it, what colour it was. Those aren't filled in details, those are memories of something that apparently never existed. Now let's talk about movie quotes. The things we've repeated our entire lives. The lines that have become part of our cultural language. Think about Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, one of the most famous scenes in cinema history. Darth Vader standing over Luke Skywalker, about to deliver the revelation that changes everything. What does he say? Luke, I am your father. That's the line everyone knows. It's been quoted in playgrounds, parodied in comedies, referenced in thousands of other films and television shows. You've probably said it yourself, or heard someone else say it, dozens of times. It's burned into popular culture as one of the most iconic moments in film history, except that's not what he says. The actual line is "No, I am your father." No Luke at all. It's a response to Luke's accusation about his father's death. The word "no" is the entire point of the line. It's the contradiction that sets up the reveal. But somewhere in the decades since 1980, the quote changed. People started saying, Luke, I am your father, because it added context, made the quote understandable on its own, without needing to explain the scene. And that makes sense. Quotes evolve. They get modified to make them more quotable, more shareable. That's a natural process, but here's what's strange. Many people don't just misquote it. They remember hearing, Luke, I am your father in the actual movie, not in parodies, not in references, in the original scene. They remember James Earl Jones's voice delivering that specific line with that specific emphasis. They remember the moment, the music, the camera angle. They remember Vader saying Luke before the revelation, but he doesn't. He never did. Watch the scene right now. You'll hear, no, I am your father. Clear as day. No ambiguity, no room for interpretation. So where did that memory come from? Think about the name of the Looney Tunes cartoons. How is it spelled? Is it tunes, like music, or tunes, like cartoons? For many people, tunes seems obvious. They're cartoons. The word makes sense. It fits. But it's always been tunes, like music. Because the original cartoons were created as musical shorts, meant to showcase Warner Brothers' music library. The animation came second. The music came first. So Looney Tunes, not tunes. And that looks wrong, doesn't it? It feels like a strange choice, like a misspelling that somehow became official. Your brain wants to correct it, wants to add that second O, make it make sense as cartoons instead of music. But it's always been tunes. These aren't isolated incidents. These aren't random errors scattered across different people's memories in different ways. These are patterns, these are thousands of people, sometimes millions, all remembering the exact same wrong thing. The same spelling, the same design, the same quote, the same details, and they're not just wrong. They're wrong in identical ways. If this was simple memory failure, you'd expect variation. One person remembers a monocle, another remembers glasses, another remembers an eye patch. One person remembers Curious George with a long tail, another remembers a short tail, another remembers it being striped. But that's not what happens. Instead, thousands of people remember a monocle, the same monocle. They can describe it the same way. Gold rim, single lens, chain attached. Thousands remember a cornucopia, the same cornucopia. Brown woven pattern, horn shape, fruit spilling out. Thousands remember, Luke, I am your father. Not Lucas or Luke Skywalker or any other variation, that exact phrase. The consistency is what makes this unsettling, because individual memory failure looks different than this. Individual mistakes are messy, varied, personal. These memories are coordinated, aligned, as if thousands of people experienced the same thing, then woke up in a world where it never happened. Have you ever had a moment where something felt off? Where you could swear something was different, but everyone around you insists it's always been the way it is now? Where you feel like you're going crazy because your memory is so clear, so certain, but the evidence says otherwise? That feeling has a name now. It's called the Mandela Effect, named after the case that started it all. Thousands of people remembering Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, remembering news coverage of his funeral, remembering the aftermath. But he didn't die in prison. He was released, became president of South Africa, and died in 2013. So where did those memories come from? False memory, they say. Confabulation, the brain filling in gaps, making assumptions, mixing up similar events. And maybe that explains some of it. Memory is fallible. Everyone knows that. We forget details, mix up dates, conflate similar experiences. But does that explain thousands of people remembering the exact same false detail? Does it explain memories so vivid and specific that people would stake their certainty on them? Does it explain the cornucopia, the monocle, the tail, the quotes, all wrong in identical ways across different countries, different generations, different backgrounds? Or is something else happening? What if these aren't false memories at all? What if they're real memories from a reality that no longer matches this one? What if the cornucopia was there in the world you came from? What if the Monopoly man wore a monocle in the timeline you started in? What if Curious George had a tail in the version of reality you remember? What if you're not misremembering? What if you're remembering correctly, but you're not in the same reality anymore? That idea sounds impossible. It sounds like science fiction, like conspiracy theory, like the kind of thing that can't be taken seriously. But let's sit with it for a moment. Let's not dismiss it immediately. Let's just consider what it would mean if it were true. If you've shifted between realities, between timelines, between parallel versions of the world, you wouldn't necessarily notice the big things. The big things would need to stay consistent for the timeline to remain stable. Your family, your friends, your home, your job, the major events of history. Those would need to be the same, or close enough that you wouldn't question them. But small things could change, details that don't matter to the overall structure of reality. A logo here, a spelling there, a quote that everyone remembers slightly wrong. Details so small that most people wouldn't even notice. Details so insignificant that even if you did notice, you'd assume you were mistaken. Unless thousands of other people noticed the same things. Unless they all remembered the same details being different. Unless the pattern became impossible to ignore. We're going to explore what could cause this. We're going to look at quantum mechanics, parallel universes, simulation theory, timeline shifts. We're going to examine the possibility that reality isn't as stable as we assume, that you might have crossed boundaries you didn't know existed, that the world you remember might not be the world you're in now. But first, let's just sit with the strangeness, with the feeling that something isn't quite right, with the realization that thousands of people share your memories of things that apparently never existed. Because that shared experience, that pattern, that consistency across all these wrong memories might be the most important clue we have. The pattern continues. Once you start noticing, you see it everywhere. Movie quotes you've said your whole life, suddenly wrong. Brand names spelled differently than you remember, logos that look off, songs that end differently, and always thousands of other people remember it the same way you do. Think about the movie Snow White. The evil queen stands before her magic mirror, asking her famous question. What does she say? Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? You've heard it quoted that way your entire life. It's been referenced in Halloween costumes, parodied in comedies, printed on merchandise. It's one of those lines that everyone knows, even people who've never seen the movie. Except that's not what she says. In the actual film, the line is, magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all? Not mirror, mirror, not of them all. Different words, different rhythm, different meaning even. Magic mirror is a direct address, naming what the object is. Fairest one of all changes the grammar, the emphasis. And yet the misquote is so pervasive that a major Hollywood film, released in 2012, was titled Mirror Mirror, using the false version of the line. Books reference it, costumes print it. People have been saying mirror mirror for generations, believing it came from the original Disney film. But it didn't, it never did. So where did that version come from? How did it become more famous than the actual line? Why does everyone remember it wrong in exactly the same way? Think about Forrest Gump. The scene on the park bench, one of the most quoted moments in cinema. Life is like a box of chocolates, simple, beautiful, profound. You've heard it quoted at graduations, seen it on motivational posters, heard it referenced in other films and television shows. It's become a piece of folk wisdom, a way to talk about uncertainty and surprise in life. Except that's not what he says. The actual line is, my mama always said life was like a box of chocolates. Past tense, not is, but was. Not a present observation about life, but a memory of something his mother told him. The meaning shifts. The grammar changes. The relationship between the speaker and the statement becomes different. It's not Forrest's wisdom. It's his mother's, filtered through his memory. But the misquote has colonized popular culture more successfully than the real line. People say, life is like a box of chocolates, without the attribution to his mother, without the past tense, without the context. And many people insist they remember hearing it that way in the movie. They remember Tom Hanks saying those exact words in that exact way. They don't feel like they're using a shortened version. They feel like they're quoting the film accurately, but they're not. They never were. Think about the band Queen, their song We Are the Champions, one of the most recognisable anthems in rock history. You know how it ends, the final line. We are the champions of the world. That triumphant conclusion, often sung by crowds at sporting events, the ultimate victory song. You can probably hear Freddie Mercury's voice right now, belting out those final words. Except in the studio recording, he doesn't sing of the world at the end. The song concludes with We Are the Champions, and that's it. No final phrase, no of the world to complete what feels like it should be the natural conclusion of the line. It ends abruptly, almost awkwardly, leaving the phrase hanging without resolution. The confusion comes from live performances, where Mercury often did add of the world at the end, giving audiences the completion they expected. But the original recording from 1977, the one on the album, the one that was played on the radio, doesn't include it. And yet people remember it there. They remember hearing it on their CDs, their cassette tapes, their vinyl records. They remember the studio version ending that way. Some swear they can hear it right now in their memory, but it's not there. It never was. Think about a different kind of change, not words, but images. Visual memories that thousands of people share. C-3PO from Star Wars. The Golden Protocol droid. Picture him in your mind. Shiny gold metal from head to toe, reflecting light, gleaming in every scene, completely gold. Except he's not. C-3PO has always had one silver leg. Since the very first film in 1977, the lower right leg has been silver in every movie, in the official merchandise, in the promotional photos. It's been documented in behind-the-scenes footage. It's visible in every scene if you look for it, but most people don't remember the silver leg. They remember him as entirely gold. When they picture C-3PO, they see uniform golden plating. When they think back to watching the original trilogy, they don't recall any silver. Even toys and action figures, which have faithfully reproduced the silver leg since the beginning, somehow don't register in memory. People look at current images and assume something changed. The silver leg feels new, recent, wrong. Like it was added later, maybe for the special editions or the prequels, but it was always there, from day one, in every shot, every scene, every appearance. The character has never been entirely gold. So why do thousands of people remember him that way? Why does the silver leg feel like a change, an addition, something that doesn't belong? Think about smaller changes, spellings that look wrong, brand names that seem off. Kit Kat, the candy bar. Is there a dash between Kit and Kat, or is it one word? For many people, Kit Kat seems correct. 2 words connected by a hyphen, but the official spelling has no dash. It's Kit Kat. 1 word. Has been since the product was created. Febreze, the air freshener. How many E's? Most people assume it's spelled like breeze with 2 E's. Febreze. That's how it sounds when you say it. That's how the word it's based on is spelled. But the brand only has 1 E. Febreze always has. And that looks wrong to a lot of people, like a typo that somehow became official. Looney Tunes. We've already mentioned this one, but it's worth sitting with for a moment, because it really does feel incorrect. Tunes, like music, for animated cartoons. Your brain wants to fix it, wants to make it Looney Tunes, which would make sense for cartoon characters. But it's tunes, because of music, because that was the original concept, and that explanation doesn't make the spelling feel any less wrong. Think about Jiffy peanut butter, except there's no Jiffy. There's Jif, always has been. Just Jif, 3 letters. But many people remember Jiffy, they remember the jar, they remember seeing it on shelves, they remember the extra letters making it feel more like a peanut butter brand name. Jiffy sounds right, Jif sounds incomplete. These are small things, tiny details. The kind of things you might not even notice unless someone pointed them out. A missing hyphen, a single letter, an extra word, things that seem too insignificant to matter, but they add up. 1 spelling change you might dismiss. 2, maybe a coincidence. 5, you start wondering. 10, you're questioning your memory. 20, you're questioning reality. And these are just examples. There are hundreds more, some affecting millions of people, some noticed by smaller groups but still showing the same pattern, the same identical false memory shared across thousands of individuals who have no connection to each other. Think about the children's book character, the little engine that could. What does the engine say? I think I can. I think I can. That's the famous line, the mantra of determination. Except in many versions of the story, the engine actually says, I think I can, I know I can. Different message, different progression, moving from uncertainty to certainty, but most people remember only I think I can, repeated. Or think about the Mona Lisa, one of the most famous paintings in human history. Picture it in your mind. Leonardo da Vinci's masterpiece. Her expression. Is she smiling? For centuries, people have debated the subtle nature of her expression, often described as enigmatic, mysterious, hard to define. But many people remember her being more serious, more neutral. They remember the mystery being whether she was smiling at all, not about the nature of the smile. Look at the painting now. She's clearly smiling. It's subtle, yes, but definitely present. A small, knowing smile. Not enigmatic in the sense of is she smiling, but enigmatic in the sense of why is she smiling that way? For some people, that smile feels too obvious, too clear, like something changed, like the expression shifted from ambiguous to definite, even though art historians have been discussing her smile for hundreds of years. The documentation has always described her as smiling, but the memory doesn't match. Think about another visual change, the thinker. the famous sculpture by Rodin. How is he sitting? Where is his hand? Most people picture the fist on his forehead, that classic thinking pose, knuckles pressed to the brow, deep in contemplation, except the actual sculpture shows his hand on his chin, knuckles under his jaw, not pressed to his forehead. The pose is different. The positioning doesn't match what thousands of people remember seeing in textbooks, in museums, in photographs. And yes, there are other sculptures and poses with hands on foreheads. Yes, people might be mixing up different images. But the memories are specific. People remember the thinker specifically. Rodin's famous sculpture specifically. Not a generic thinking pose, but that particular artwork. And they remember it differently than it appears. These aren't vague memories. These are specific visual recollections. People can describe the angle, the positioning, the way the bronze looked, the pedestal it sat on. They have detailed mental images of something that doesn't match the actual sculpture. So what's happening here? Why are so many people wrong about so many things in such consistent, identical ways? Let's consider the standard explanation first. False memory. The brain's tendency to fill in gaps, make assumptions, create narratives that feel true but aren't. Memory researchers have shown that false memories can be implanted with suggestion, that memories can be altered by asking leading questions, that what we remember is often reconstruction rather than recall, our minds piecing together fragments and assumptions to create a coherent story. This explains individual errors. It explains how one person might misremember a detail. But does it explain thousands of people misremembering the same detail in the same way? Does it explain why the false memories are so specific, so identical, so resistant to correction? Think about the cornucopia again. If it's just false memory, why a cornucopia? Why not a basket, which is more common? Why not a bowl? Why not a wooden crate, or a wheelbarrow, or any number of other containers? Why do all the false memories converge on the same unusual object, described the same way, positioned the same way, remembered with the same level of detail? That's not how false memories typically work. False memories are usually personal, varied, influenced by individual experience and suggestion. They don't spontaneously generate identical across thousands of people who have never communicated with each other. Unless something else is creating the pattern, unless there's a reason all these false memories align. What if they're not false? What if they're accurate memories of something that existed differently? What if the Monopoly man did wear a monocle, but not in this timeline? What if the Fruit of the Loom logo did have a cornucopia, but not in this reality? What if you remember correctly, but you're remembering a world that no longer matches this one? That possibility requires us to think about reality differently, to consider that it might not be fixed, stable, singular, to explore the idea that multiple versions might exist simultaneously, and that somehow, under certain conditions, you might shift between them. The concept sounds impossible, but quantum physics has been suggesting something similar for decades. The idea that particles exist in multiple states until observed, that reality splits into parallel branches with every quantum event, that what we experience is just one possibility among infinite others. The many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics proposes exactly this, that every time a quantum measurement occurs, the universe splits into multiple versions, each containing a different outcome. In one universe, the particle spins up. In another, it spins down. Both versions are equally real. Both continue existing. You only experience one because your consciousness follows one particular branch. If that's true at the quantum level, what about larger scales? What about objects, logos, words, quotes? Could those exist in multiple states across parallel timelines? Could you shift from one version to another without realizing it? There's a concept from Russian metaphysics called reality transurfing, the idea that reality is not a single fixed path, but a space of variations, infinite possible versions existing simultaneously. You navigate through this space, shifting between versions based on your energy, your intention, your frequency. Most shifts are unnoticed because the differences are tiny, but occasionally you notice something off, a detail that doesn't match, a memory that doesn't align. That feeling of déjà vu, or its opposite, jamais vu, where something familiar feels strange. According to this model, you're constantly surfing between closely related realities. The Mandela Effect might be evidence of this. Small discontinuities, where you notice the seams between timelines, where your memory from one version doesn't match the evidence in another. And there's another possibility, one that's even more unsettling. Quantum immortality, the theory that your consciousness always continues in timelines where you survive, that every time you face death, you don't experience it. Instead, you shift to a parallel universe where you made it through. From your perspective, you keep living. You keep experiencing. You always survive. But each time you shift, small details might change. The timeline you land in might be almost identical to the one you left, but not quite. A logo here, a spelling there, a quote slightly different, most people wouldn't notice. But some do, and when they compare notes, they discover they're not alone. They find thousands of others who remember the same changes, who shifted at the same time or from the same original timeline, who carry the same memories of a world that no longer matches this one. Have you ever had a near-death experience? A moment where you should have died but didn't? A car that almost hit you? And illness you survived against odds? A moment of pure chance that saved your life? What if you didn't survive in another timeline? What if that version of you is gone, but your consciousness continued here? What if the reality you're in now is slightly different from the one you left? That would explain the Mandela Effect. Not as false memory, but as residual memory. Accurate recollections from a timeline you're no longer in. The Monopoly man wore a monocle where you came from. The logo had a cornucopia in your original reality. Darth Vader said Luke in the version of the film that existed in your timeline. You're not wrong. You're just not in Kansas anymore, and neither are thousands of others who remember the same things, who shifted at the same time, or from the same place, or for the same reason, who found themselves in a world that looks almost right but not quite, where small things are off, where details don't match, where reality insists one thing, but memory insists another. We're going to explore these possibilities. We're going to look at the science, the theories, the evidence. We're going to consider what it means if reality is not singular, not fixed, not stable. If you can shift between timelines, if you already have. But for now, just sit with the strangeness, with the realization that your memories might be more accurate than you've been told, that thousands of people share your experience, that something is happening even if we don't fully understand what. To understand how reality might shift, we need to talk about quantum mechanics, not the complex mathematics or the technical jargon, but the fundamental strangeness at the heart of how the universe actually works. Because what quantum physics reveals is far stranger than most people realize, and it might explain everything. At the quantum level, particles don't behave the way objects do in our everyday world. They don't exist in one place with one set of properties. Instead, they exist in what's called superposition. Multiple states at once, multiple locations simultaneously. A particle can be spinning up and spinning down at the same time. It can be here and there. It can have contradictory properties that shouldn't be able to coexist until you observe it. The moment you measure a quantum particle, something happens. The superposition collapses. All those multiple possibilities reduce to one actual outcome. The particle that was everywhere becomes somewhere. The particle that was spinning both ways picks a direction. Observation forces reality to choose. This isn't theory. This isn't speculation. This is demonstrated, repeatable, experimentally verified reality. The double-slit experiment shows it clearly. Fire electrons, one at a time, at a barrier with two slits. If you don't observe which slit they go through, they behave like waves, somehow passing through both slits simultaneously and creating an interference pattern. But the moment you place a detector to see which slit each electron uses, the pattern changes. They start behaving like particles, going through one slit or the other, not both. The act of observation changes the outcome. Reality literally changes depending on whether you're watching. The universe behaves differently when observed than when unobserved. That raises an unsettling question. If observation affects reality at the quantum level, what about larger scales? What about the objects we interact with every day? What about logos, quotes, spellings, the things we're discussing? Most physicists will tell you quantum effects don't scale up, that by the time you get to anything larger than atoms, quantum weirdness averages out. The strange rules stop applying. Reality becomes fixed, determined, singular. But in 1961, physicist Eugene Wigner proposed a thought experiment that challenged this assumption. It's called Wigner's friend. Imagine Wigner has a friend in a laboratory who performs a quantum measurement. The friend observes a particle and sees it in a definite state. Spin up, let's say. From the friend's perspective, the measurement is complete. Reality has been determined. But Wigner is outside the laboratory. From his perspective, he hasn't observed the measurement yet. So from his point of view, the entire laboratory, including his friend and the particle, is still in superposition. Both outcomes are still occurring simultaneously. Two observers, same event, contradictory realities. The friend sees a definite outcome. Wigner sees continued superposition. Both perspectives are equally valid. So which one is real? For decades, this was just a thought experiment, a philosophical puzzle. But in 2018, physicists at Heriot-Watt University actually performed the experiment. They created a scenario where two observers could measure the same quantum event and compare results. The outcome was remarkable. Both observers were correct. Both realities existed. The measurements produced results that were, in the words of the researchers, irreconcilable. There was no single objective reality that both observers agreed on. Instead, each observer experienced their own version of events, and those versions contradicted each other in ways that couldn't be explained away. This has profound implications. It suggests that objective reality, the idea that there's one true state of the universe, might not exist. Instead, reality might be observer-dependent. Your reality is different from my reality. Not in terms of subjective interpretation, but in terms of actual physical facts. What this means for the Mandela Effect is significant. If reality is observer-dependent, if different observers can experience genuinely different outcomes from the same event, then maybe what we're calling false memories aren't false at all. You remember the Monopoly man with a monocle, because in your observed reality, he had one. Someone else remembers him without it because in their observed reality, he didn't. Both memories are accurate. Both realities occurred. This connects to another concept in quantum mechanics, the many worlds interpretation. Proposed by physicist Hugh Everett in 1957, this theory suggests that every quantum measurement doesn't just collapse possibilities into one outcome. Instead, all possible outcomes occur, each in a separate branch of reality. The universe splits. In one branch, the particle spins up. In another branch, it spins down. Both universes are equally real. Both continue existing. You only experience one because your consciousness follows one particular branch. But the other branches are still there, containing other versions of you experiencing the other outcomes. If this is true, and many physicists take it seriously, then there are countless parallel universes. Infinite variations of reality, each one slightly different based on accumulated quantum choices. In most of these universes, things would be almost identical to this one. The same history, the same people, the same events. Because most quantum choices don't affect large-scale reality, but occasionally a quantum event has larger consequences. A mutation occurs or doesn't occur. A neuron fires or doesn't fire. And that small quantum difference cascades upward into a macro-level change. Maybe in one universe, when the Monopoly game was being designed, someone made a slightly different choice about the character's appearance. The quantum state of neurons in their brain went one way instead of another, and in that universe, the Monopoly man got a monocle. In this universe, he didn't. Both versions exist. Both are real. The question is, can you move between them? The standard many worlds interpretation says no. The branches split and never reconnect. You're locked into your branch. Your consciousness follows one path through the infinitely branching tree of possibilities. But what if that's not quite right? What if under certain conditions, consciousness can shift between nearby branches? What if you can move between realities that are almost identical, differing only in small details? That's where quantum immortality comes in. The theory goes like this. Imagine you're in a life-threatening situation, a car crash. In most branches of reality, you die. The vast majority of possible outcomes lead to your death. But in a few branches, through sheer quantum chance, you survive. A particle decays at just the right moment. A neuron fires differently. A quantum fluctuation creates a condition that prevents your death. Your consciousness can't experience the branches where you died. Dead observers don't observe. So from your subjective perspective, you always find yourself in one of the rare branches where you survived. Your consciousness automatically shifts to a timeline where you continue existing. Not because you chose it, but because consciousness requires a living observer. You can only ever experience the realities where you're alive to experience them. From an outside perspective, you died. Your family mourns. But from your perspective, you walked away. Maybe shaken, maybe confused about how you survived, but alive. And here's where it connects to the Mandela Effect. Maybe in the timeline you shifted to, small things are different. The Monopoly man doesn't have a monocle in this reality. The logo changed. The spelling is different. You don't notice at first because you're dealing with the aftermath, recovering, getting back to normal life. But later, weeks or months or years later, you see something that doesn't match your memory, and it bothers you. You check. The evidence says it's always been this way. But your memory is so clear, except it never was that way. Not in this timeline. In the timeline you came from, it was different, but you're not there anymore. Think about how many near-death experiences you've had. Moments where you almost died but didn't. Times when you got lucky, when chance saved you. What if each of those moments was a shift? What if you've moved between timelines dozens of times without realizing it? The changes would accumulate. One timeline has this spelling, another has that logo, another has a different quote. You'd carry memories from multiple realities, all mixed together. Most of the time, you wouldn't notice. The differences would be too small, but occasionally something would stand out. The Mandela Effect might be the accumulated evidence of these shifts, the small discontinuities that reveal you've moved between realities, and you're not alone. Thousands of other people have had near-death experiences. Thousands of other consciousnesses have shifted between timelines. Some of them shifted at the same times you did. Some came from the same original timeline. When you find each other, when you compare notes, you discover you remember the same things, because you came from the same place. This theory explains several strange aspects of the Mandela Effect. It explains why the memories are so consistent. Because people aren't making individual errors. They're accurately remembering a shared reality they came from. It explains why the changes are small. Because you can only shift to nearby timelines, ones that are almost identical. It explains why it's so disturbing. Because on some level, you recognize something fundamental has changed. You're not in the world you started in. There's another possibility to consider. What if reality itself is shifting, not just your position within it? What if timelines can merge? Imagine two parallel universes that are very similar, almost identical. They've been running separately, each developing in nearly the same way. Then something happens. Some event, some condition causes them to converge. The two timelines merge back into one. Most things align perfectly, the same history, the same people. But some details conflict. In one timeline, the Monopoly man had a monocle. In the other, he didn't. When the timelines merge, only one version can exist going forward. People from both original timelines are now in the same merged timeline. Half remember the monocle, half don't. Both groups are correct about what they experienced, what would cause timelines to merge. One possibility is CERN, the Large Hadron Collider, the most powerful particle accelerator ever built, designed to smash protons together at nearly the speed of light. Its purpose is to study fundamental particles and forces, but some people worry it's doing more than that. Some believe that by generating such extreme conditions, by creating energies that haven't existed since moments after the Big Bang, CERN might be affecting the fabric of reality itself. Could colliding particles at those energies create ripples in space-time? Could it cause quantum fluctuations large enough to affect macro-level reality? Could it somehow cause timelines to merge or shift? It sounds like science fiction, but CERN operates at the boundary of known physics. They're literally exploring conditions that have never existed on Earth before. Interestingly, people have noted that reports of new Mandela effects seem to cluster around dates when CERN runs major experiments, times when the Large Hadron Collider is powered up to full capacity. Correlation isn't causation, but it's worth noting. Some people have gone further. They believe CERN's true purpose isn't just scientific research, that it was created specifically to prevent a catastrophe, that something was supposed to happen in 2012, something that would have ended the world, and CERN's experiments succeeded in averting it. But the cost was a shift, a jump to a different timeline, a reality where the catastrophe didn't occur, but where small details are different. The Mandela effects we're experiencing are the side effects of that shift, the evidence that we're not in the original timeline anymore, we're in a branch reality, one where humanity survived but where things aren't quite right. There's one more possibility to consider. What if this is a simulation? What if the universe we experience is not fundamental physical reality, but a constructed environment? A program running on some substrate we can't directly access? If that's true, then the Mandela effect might not be about shifting between timelines. It might be about patches and updates to the simulation itself. Think about how software works. Developers release a program, then they find bugs, inefficiencies, things that could be improved, so they release updates, they change the code. Sometimes those changes are visible, new features, different interfaces, but sometimes they're back-end changes that users aren't supposed to notice. The program looks the same from the outside, but the underlying code has been modified. What if reality works the same way? What if the simulation gets updated? Small changes to the code, meant to optimize something, fix a bug, adjust a parameter. From the inside, most people wouldn't notice, but some people's memory cache doesn't update properly. They remember the previous version, so they see a logo and it looks wrong. They hear a quote and it sounds off. They check the records and everything says it's always been this way, but they know it wasn't. They remember the old version. The simulation hypothesis is taken seriously by some physicists and philosophers. The argument goes like this. If it's possible to create a simulation of conscious beings in a detailed environment, and if a civilization reaches that capability, they'll probably create many such simulations, which means the number of simulated realities would vastly outnumber base reality. Statistically, if you exist, you're more likely to be in a simulation than in the original physical universe. And if this is a simulation, it explains several things. It explains quantum mechanics, the way reality seems to render only what's being observed, like a video game that only generates detail where the player is looking. It explains the fine-tuning of physical constants, because those parameters were set intentionally when the simulation was designed. It explains the Mandela effect, as glitches, updates, patches to the code that some users notice and others don't. In a simulation, changing a logo is trivial. Altering a quote is a simple edit. Adjusting a spelling requires minimal code modification, and if the change is made retroactively in most places, most people would never notice. Only those whose memory somehow preserved the pre-update version would see the discrepancy. So we have several possibilities, shifting between parallel timelines through quantum immortality. Timeline merges, causing populations from different realities to share one world. CERN experiments affecting the fabric of space-time. Simulation updates changing details retroactively, or some combination of these. What they all have in common is this. Reality might not be singular, fixed, objective. It might be fluid, branching, observer-dependent. And you might have moved through it, shifted between versions, without ever realizing. Until now. Until you started noticing the discrepancies, the things that don't match, the memories that contradict the evidence. Those aren't errors. Those might be the most accurate perceptions you have, evidence of where you've been, proof that you're not in the reality you started in. There's a concept from Russian metaphysics that might explain what's actually happening. It comes from a book called Reality Transurfing by Vadim Zeland, and it suggests something remarkable. Reality isn't a single fixed path. It's a space of variations, infinite possible versions of the world existing simultaneously like pages in an infinite book. And you're not stuck on one page. You're constantly moving through them, shifting between closely related realities based on your energy, your focus, your choices. Zeland describes this space of variations as containing every possible version of every event, every outcome, every detail. The Monopoly man with a monocle exists in some variations, without it in others. Both versions are equally real, equally valid, existing simultaneously in different sectors of the space. Most of the time, the shifts between variations are so small you never notice. You move from one version to another and everything seems continuous because the differences are microscopic. But occasionally, you shift far enough that details don't match anymore. A logo looks different, a spelling changed, a quote isn't quite right. According to Zeland's model, you're not misremembering. You're accurately remembering a different variation, a different page in the book. You've surfed from one reality to another, and now you're noticing the seams, the discontinuities, the places where this version doesn't quite match the one you came from. The space of variations contains every possible version of reality, every spelling of every word, every design of every logo, every version of every quote. They all exist simultaneously in this vast space of possibilities. You navigate through it constantly, usually unconsciously, drawn toward variations that match your dominant thoughts and emotional states. When something traumatic happens, when you face death and survive, the shift can be more dramatic. You might jump to a variation further from your starting point, far enough that the small differences become noticeable. The Monopoly man's monocle, the cornucopia, the movie quotes, these aren't errors, they're markers, evidence that you've travelled through the space of variations, that you're not on the same page you started on. Think about your own life. Have you ever had a moment where everything felt different, where you couldn't quite put your finger on it, but something seemed off about the world, where reality felt slightly wrong, like you'd stepped into a parallel version of your life that was almost right but not quite? That might have been a shift, a moment when you moved far enough through the space of variations that the transition became perceptible. Some people report this feeling intensely around certain years. 2012 is mentioned frequently. 2008, 2016, times when something seemed to fundamentally change about reality. When the world started feeling different in ways that go beyond politics or technology or culture. Could those have been mass shift events? Times when large numbers of people moved together from one variation to another? When entire populations surfed to a different version of reality, carrying their memories from the old one, but now living in a new one where details are different? It would explain why so many people share the same sense of wrongness about the same time periods. Why so many feel like something changed, something they can't quite articulate, around those specific years. If reality transurfing is real, if you can move between variations, then the Mandela Effect makes perfect sense. It's not about memory failure, it's about reality navigation. You're noticing the journey, seeing the evidence that you've moved, recognizing that the page you're on now isn't the page you started with. And here's the important part. If you're constantly moving through variations anyway, if this is how reality actually works, then maybe you can learn to navigate more consciously. Maybe you can choose which direction to move, which variations to shift toward. Instead of being pulled randomly by trauma or chance, you could surf deliberately, moving toward versions of reality that align with what you want to experience. That's the promise of reality transurfing, that once you understand the space of variations, once you recognize that you're constantly moving through it, you can take more conscious control of where you go. You can't change this reality directly. You can't force the Monopoly man to have a monocle in this variation. But you can shift to a variation where what you want already exists, where the outcomes you desire have already occurred. You navigate by frequency, by the energy you emit. by what you focus on and expect. And slowly, subtly, you move through the space toward variations that match. The Mandela Effect might be your first clue that this is possible, that reality isn't fixed, that you can move through it, that the world you experience is not the only version. There are others, countless others, and under the right conditions, you can reach them. But there's something else to consider, something that connects reality transurfing with quantum immortality. What if every time you should have died, you didn't just shift to the nearest survivable timeline? What if you shifted to a variation where you were more aligned, where your frequency matched better, where reality was more responsive to your consciousness? Think about near-death experiences, not just as survival, but as upgrades. Each time you face death and continue, you move to a version of reality where you're more capable, more aware, more aligned with outcomes that serve you. The shift isn't random, it's directional, moving you toward better variations. That would explain why some people who survive multiple near-death experiences report feeling different afterward. Not just grateful or changed emotionally, but actually different. Like they're operating on a different frequency. Like reality responds to them differently than it did before. Maybe that's what's happening. Maybe quantum immortality isn't just about survival, it's about evolution. Each shift moves you to a better variation, a version of reality where you're more aligned with your purpose, where your consciousness is more integrated with the fabric of reality itself. And the Mandela Effect is the side effect, the evidence left behind as you move through these variations, carrying memories from each one, accumulating experience from multiple versions of reality. If that's true, then noticing the Mandela Effect isn't a problem. It's a sign, evidence that you're navigating successfully, that you've moved far enough through the space of variations to see the journey, that you're not stuck in one version of reality. You're fluid, mobile, traveling through possibilities in ways most people never recognize. Have you ever noticed that some people seem luckier than others? That some people consistently land in good situations while others struggle despite similar efforts? Maybe it's not luck. Maybe it's navigation. Maybe some people, consciously or unconsciously, are better at surfing through the space of variations toward favorable outcomes. They move through reality differently, they shift more fluidly. They end up in variations where things work out, where opportunities appear, where problems resolve themselves, and maybe the Mandela Effect is more common among these people because they're moving further, faster, through more variations, so they notice more discrepancies, more things that don't quite match, more evidence of the journey. For them, reality is more fluid, more responsive, more obviously navigable, while others stay relatively fixed in one variation, barely moving, experiencing a stable but less responsive reality. This might sound like magical thinking, like wishful interpretation of random events. But consider the quantum physics we discussed earlier, observer-dependent reality, the many worlds interpretation, the possibility that consciousness plays a role in collapsing quantum possibilities into experienced outcomes. If consciousness affects reality at the quantum level, and if quantum effects can cascade upward into macro-level changes, then consciousness affecting which variation of reality you experience isn't magic. It's physics. Poorly understood physics, perhaps. Physics that current models don't fully capture, but physics nonetheless. The mechanism exists. Observation affects outcomes. Consciousness collapses possibilities. Your attention, your focus, your emotional state, these might all be variables in determining which branch of reality you experience, which page in the book of variations you land on. So what does this mean for you? What do you do with this information? First, recognize that noticing the Mandela Effect isn't a sign that something's wrong with you. It's a sign that you're aware, that you're paying attention, that you're conscious, enough to notice when reality doesn't quite match your memory. That's valuable. Most people never notice. They accept whatever reality presents as the only possibility, never questioning, never recognizing the discrepancies. You're seeing further, perceiving more. recognizing that reality might be more fluid than you were taught. Second, consider your memories more carefully. When something doesn't match, when you remember something differently than it appears now, don't immediately assume you're wrong. Hold both possibilities. Your memory might be accurate for where you came from. The evidence might be accurate for where you are now. Both can be true if you've moved between variations. This doesn't mean all your memories are perfect. Human memory is fallible. But it does mean that some discrepancies might be real. Actual evidence of movement through reality rather than simple mistakes. Third, pay attention to the feeling. That sense of wrongness when you encounter a Mandela effect. That vertigo, that disorientation, that certainty that something changed. That feeling might be your consciousness recognizing the shift. Your deeper awareness noticing that you've moved. It's information, a signal that you've navigated to a different variation. Instead of dismissing it, lean into it. Notice when it happens. Notice what else is different around those times. Notice if the shifts cluster around certain events in your life. Near-death experiences, major decisions, moments of intense emotion or focus. These might be the times when you move furthest through the space of variations, when you surf most dramatically between realities. And finally, consider the possibility that you have more agency than you think. That reality is more responsive than you were taught, that the world you experience tomorrow might be a different variation than the world you experience today, and that your consciousness, your focus, your intentions might play a role in determining which variation you land in. This doesn't mean you can just wish things into existence. It doesn't mean ignoring practical action or pretending limitations don't exist, but it does mean recognizing that reality might be more fluid, more navigable, more responsive to consciousness than the purely mechanical model suggests. And that noticing the Mandela Effect might be your first clue that you're already navigating, already surfing through variations, already moving through the space of possibilities in ways you never realized. The question isn't whether reality shifts. The evidence suggests it does. The question is whether you can navigate those shifts more consciously, whether you can surf with intention rather than being tossed randomly by the currents, whether you can move toward variations that serve you rather than just ending up wherever chance takes you. And the Mandela Effect might be your training ground, your evidence that movement is possible, your proof that you're not stuck in one fixed reality, but travelling through an infinite space of variations, carrying memories from each one, accumulating experiences from multiple versions of existence. So where does this leave us? You've seen the evidence, the monocle that was never there, the cornucopia that never existed, the quotes that were never spoken, thousands of people sharing identical memories of things that apparently never happened. You've explored the possibilities, quantum mechanics suggesting reality is observer-dependent, the many worlds, interpretation, proposing infinite parallel universes, quantum immortality suggesting you shift timelines every time you should have died, reality transurfing offering a model where you constantly navigate through variations, simulation theory suggesting we might be experiencing updates to the code, and through it all, one question remains: what's actually happening? The honest answer is we don't know, not definitively, not with certainty. The phenomenon is real, the shared memories are documented, the consistency across thousands of people is undeniable, but the mechanism, the cause, the true nature of what's occurring, that remains mysterious, and maybe that's exactly as it should be, because the Mandela Effect, whatever it is, has done something remarkable. It's opened a door, a crack in the wall of consensus reality, a glimpse into the possibility that the world is stranger, more fluid, more mysterious than we've been taught to believe. For most of human history, reality seemed fixed, solid, objective. The world was the way it was, and everyone could agree on basic facts. But quantum mechanics shattered that certainty at the smallest scales. It revealed that at the fundamental level, reality is probabilistic, observer-dependent, bizarre beyond comprehension. The Mandela Effect might be that same strangeness appearing at human scale. at the level of everyday experience, in logos and quotes and spellings, small things, insignificant things, but things we can all see and verify and discuss, is bringing the weirdness of quantum mechanics into lived experience, making it tangible, personal, undeniable. And once you've seen it, once you've noticed that reality might not be as fixed as you thought, everything changes. You start paying attention differently, you notice things, you question things, you hold your certainty more lightly, recognizing that what seems absolutely true today might look different tomorrow. Not because you're confused, but because reality itself might be more dynamic than the models suggest. This is uncomfortable for a lot of people. Humans crave certainty. We want solid ground. We want to know that the world we perceive is the real world, the only world, the world that everyone else perceives too. The Mandela Effect threatens that certainty. It suggests the ground might be shifting beneath us, that the reality we inhabit might not be singular or stable, or shared in the way we assume, but there's another way to look at it. Instead of threatening, liberating. If reality is fluid, if you can move between variations, if consciousness plays a role in determining which version you experience, then you have more agency than you thought. You're not trapped in one fixed timeline with one predetermined outcome. You're navigating a space of infinite possibilities. Every moment presents a choice point, a quantum branch, a decision about which variation to move toward. Most of these choices are small, unconscious, made by the momentum of your thoughts and emotions and expectations. But some choices are conscious, deliberate, made with awareness of what you're doing, and those choices might steer you through the space of variations toward experiences you want to have, outcomes you want to reach, versions of reality that align with your deepest values. Think about the people who seem to live charmed lives, who consistently land in good situations, who navigate challenges with unusual grace, who seem to be playing a different game than everyone else. Maybe they are. Maybe they've learned, consciously or unconsciously, to surf through reality more skillfully, to navigate the space of variations with intention, to shift toward timelines where things work out. You might call it luck. You might call it positive thinking. You might call it manifestation or attraction or any number of names. But underneath, the mechanism might be the same. Consciousness navigating through quantum possibilities. Awareness steering through the space of variations. Attention collapsing probabilities into favourable outcomes. Not through magic. Through physics we don't fully understand yet. The Mandela Effect might be your first evidence that this is real, that you're already navigating, already shifting, already moving through variations in ways you never recognized. The monocle you remember isn't a mistake, it's a marker, evidence of a reality you inhabited before, a variation you experienced, a page in the infinite book that you've moved past but still carry in memory. And if you've moved once, you can move again. If you've shifted between variations unconsciously, you might learn to shift consciously. If reality has already changed around you without your awareness, imagine what might be possible with awareness, with intention, with deliberate navigation through the space of possibilities. This doesn't mean ignoring practical reality. It doesn't mean pretending limitations don't exist, or that you can just wish problems away. The variations you can reach are constrained by proximity. You move to nearby realities, not wildly different ones. You navigate within the possible, not into pure fantasy, but within those constraints, within the space of reachable variations, you might have more influence than you think. Your focus matters, your expectations matter, your emotional state matters. Not as magical thinking, but as variables in a quantum equation that determines which timeline you experience, which branch you follow, which page you land on. Consider this. Right now, as you listen to these words, you're at a quantum choice point. Infinite futures branch out from this moment. In some variations, you dismiss everything you've heard, write it off as interesting speculation, but ultimately meaningless. Return to your life unchanged. In other variations, something shifts. You start paying attention differently, noticing reality more carefully, holding your assumptions more lightly. opening to the possibility that the world is stranger and more responsive than you thought. In some variations, you experiment. You test whether your consciousness can navigate, whether your focus can steer, whether reality responds to deliberate intention. In others, you simply become more aware, more present, more conscious of the choices you're making and the timeline they're leading you toward. All these variations exist, all these futures are possible. Which one you experience depends on the choices you make right now, the focus you choose, the intention you set, the version of yourself you decide to be in this moment. That's the real payoff of the Mandela Effect. Not solving the mystery of what's causing it, not proving one theory correct and the others wrong, but recognizing that reality might be more fluid than you thought, that consciousness might play a bigger role than you realized, that you might be navigating through infinite possibilities, whether you know it or not, and that once you know it, once you see it, once you recognize the game you're playing, you might play it differently, more consciously, more deliberately, more skillfully. The Monopoly Man's monocle doesn't matter, not really. Whether it existed or didn't exist, whether you shifted timelines or just misremembered, that's not the point. The point is what it reveals, the crack it opens in consensus reality, the possibility it suggests, the agency it implies. You're not a passive observer in a fixed universe. You're an active participant in a fluid multiverse, a navigator through infinite variations, a consciousness that collapses possibilities into experienced reality with every moment of attention, every choice, every shift in focus or emotion or intention. Have you died before? Have you shifted timelines without realizing? Are you in the reality you started in? Or have you moved to a different variation through a series of quantum jumps too small to notice individually, but accumulating over time into significant displacement? You'll never know for certain. There's no way to prove it, no test to run, no experiment to perform that would give you a definitive answer. But maybe certainty isn't what matters. Maybe what matters is possibility. The recognition that reality might be more open, more navigable, more responsive than you thought, that you might have more agency than you realized, that the future might be less determined and more choice-dependent than the mechanical model suggests. So the next time you encounter a Mandela Effect, the next time something doesn't match your memory and thousands of others share your confusion, don't just dismiss it. Don't just accept that you're wrong and move on. Pause, notice, feel into that sense of wrongness, that vertigo, that certainty that something changed. Because that feeling might be real, not a failure of memory, but a success of perception. Your consciousness recognizing that you've moved, that the page has turned, that you're in a different variation than you were before. And if you've moved, you can move again. If reality has shifted once, it can shift again. If you've navigated unconsciously, you might learn to navigate consciously. The space of variations is infinite. The possibilities are endless. You're already traveling through them. The question is whether you'll travel with awareness or without it, with intention or without it, toward what you want or just wherever the currents take you. The Mandela Effect is not the mystery you need to solve. It's the invitation you need to accept. An invitation to see reality differently, to hold your certainty more lightly, to recognize that consciousness might matter more than you thought, to consider that you might be more powerful, more fluid, more capable of navigation than you ever realized. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, let these possibilities settle into your awareness. Don't try to figure them out. Don't try to prove or disprove them. Just let them be. Let your mind rest with the strangeness, with the mystery, with the unsettling recognition that the world might be far more fluid than you were taught to believe. And tomorrow, when you wake up, pay attention. Notice what feels different. Notice what doesn't quite match. Notice the small discontinuities, the tiny moments of wrongness, the subtle sense that something has shifted. Because those moments might be the most valuable perceptions you have. Evidence that you're navigating, that you're moving, that reality is responding to your consciousness in ways you're only beginning to recognize. You may not be in the reality you started in. You may have shifted countless times without knowing. The monocle may have existed where you came from. The cornucopia may have been real in your original timeline. And if that's true, then you're not misremembering. You're remembering accurately, you're just remembering a different page, a different variation, a different version of reality that you inhabited before you moved to this one. Sleep well, dream of infinite possibilities, and know that tomorrow the questions will still be there, waiting. Not demanding answers, but inviting exploration. Because in the end, it's not the answers that transform us. It's the willingness to sit with the questions, to live with uncertainty, to navigate through mystery with curiosity instead of fear. The Mandela Effect has shown you that reality might be stranger than you thought. What you do with that knowledge, how you navigate through the space of variations, which timeline you choose to inhabit, that's up to you. The possibilities are infinite. The choice is yours, and the journey has already begun.